Mills. I want to thank you all very much for coming tonight to listen and to participate in a topic that we feel is very important for our community, that will impact the future for my kids and my grandkids and your families for a long time to come. And so I think it's important that we have a broader dialogue about it. Somebody said I should tell you a little bit about myself, and I won't spend much time on that, but I was born in Brookings, and I was thinking about that after they made that comment, that I was born in the hospital that is now, I think, called West Hall, part of the university. At the time that I was born in 1954, it was the Brookings Hospital. So my history in this town goes back a long time. My connection to this university and to what it has become and what it can be is strong, and all of us that are involved in the group that's presenting tonight are advocates for SDSU, and we don't want anybody here to take what we say tonight in any way other than that. We just want our future to be strong for both our community and for our university, and that's why we're concerned and want to share those concerns with you tonight. We will have, our presentation is about 30 minutes, give or take, and after that there is opportunity for questions. We'll have somebody roaming around with a microphone, questions and comments, and we welcome those. This is, as we announced it, a town hall meeting, and we encourage you to participate in that manner. That's what it's going to take if we're going to have the best future. And again, I thank you for being here. You're showing your commitment to our community by being here tonight, and your time is very valuable, so thank you. On to our presentation. Well, our university and our community have a long history together, and it is a history that's full of cooperation. Goes back for decades, and I'm sure if we got Paul Morarity or Harvey Mills who are in the audience tonight up here, they could tell you some of that cooperation from decades. I would share a little bit about some of that recent cooperation that's all fresh in our minds. Some of those current examples: a performing arts center, a wellness center, McCrory Gardens, and of course the gateway signs that we saw at the outset are all examples of where the community and the university have partnered to do something that we all thought was beneficial and mutually beneficial. That kind of history of cooperation that's been going on for decades leads to some expectations, and on the part of business people like me, it leads to actions. We take action based on that history and the foundations that are established. In the case of businesses, our Brookings businesses for a long time have provided the housing needs of SDSU for the juniors and senior students and the grad students, and also for the retail and many other products and services that students need. That's part of that history. SDSU has kept their focus traditionally on education. That's what we would expect, on academics, on a strong faculty, and on the facilities that are needed to support learning and research. And that's the partnership that's worked really well, and that we hope will continue. Now, in the fall of 2009, there was what we're calling a game changer, and I don't know how you learned about it, but I learned about it on the front page of the paper when this pretty picture showed up that says SDSU, Northwest Neighborhood proposed for SDSU. And frankly, when I saw that newspaper, I didn't sleep much that night, because immediately I sensed that there was trouble coming down the road. Here's the master plan up on the screen. There's part of this booklet, and there are a few of these at the back of the room that you're welcome to look at tonight. We don't have enough for everybody. They're kind of expensive, and we're a little bit on the cheap side. But you're welcome to look at those, but please leave those at the end. But this is the summary document that was prepared in 2009, and certainly the City Council and a number of other people received copies of this. And on the screen is the master plan, picture of the master plan out of that document. Everything that's up there in yellow is what we're calling the Northwest Quadrant. These are all buildings that were proposed as part of that master plan in 2009. It's located northwest of the Ag Heritage Museum and basically on the west side, primarily on the west side of Madera, and extends out to the bypass. That's the location that would that they're talking about. And included in that master plan were 608 beds of upscale apartments, 2 115-unit assisted living complexes, 60 active adult townhomes with a community center, a variety of retail spaces, and even a 100-room hotel and conference center. And you can understand why when I started reading the article, that didn't sound like education and faculty and facilities to me. It sounded like a town. This is the copy out of the document related to retail. The bars on the right-hand side are a whole variety of retail components that might be a part of the project. But most anticipated by that master plan were a grocery store, a fitness center, a coffee house, an interactive cafe, and a convenience store. Those were the retail components that were shared in that document. So what happened in 2009 and what has happened since then? Well, right on the heels of that newspaper article, a number of us became concerned and went and spoke to the city council right away and said, you know, we love our university, but this is not a good idea for our community. They heard, and that made the front page of the paper again. But that's 3 years ago, so that's kind of like old news, and we forget quickly these days. But in addition to appearing before the City Council, on the heels of that, SDSU did conduct an informative meeting that was invitation only. And at that meeting, there was no media present, but they did clearly hear the concerns from people like Paul Moriarty and David Knipe and Ron Borkhardt and myself and Dennis Bielfeldt and a whole variety of other folks that were in that room that night who had expressed concerns, and the university administration certainly heard those back in 2009. In addition, there were letters sent to the Board of Regents. There were personal visits to the Board of Regents. There were also, I've been in at least 3 personal one-on-one meetings with university administrative officials, and every time urging them not to move forward with the Northwest Quadrant. And many hoped, if you would, that that plan would be reconsidered. And it's unfortunate to have to announce to you that you saw it probably in the paper on Friday, but it was not reconsidered. It simply moved forward slowly, but under the radar. This June, in fact, it showed up when SDSU made a proposal to the Board of Regents to ask them for the ability to issue what's called a request for proposals for Phase 1 of the Northwest Quadrant Master Plan. Myself and several other people testified at that Board of Regents meeting that was in Madison. They heard our testimony, and I think they were glad to hear it. But ultimately, they allowed SDSU to move forward with the RFP. They were curious if SDSU could get the job done. They said, we'll let you test the water, because a couple years prior, the University of South Dakota had tried this same format and was not able to do it. And we'll talk about that a little bit further. So at this point, you should know that they do not have final authority to build the project. And that's the reason for the town hall meeting. There is still opportunity for them to hear from the public and why we're here tonight. If it was all over, we wouldn't have wasted your time or ours. So that RFP got issued last week, November 7th. This is a copy off of the front page of that document. And what does it envision? On the left-hand side there, it says this would be a public-private partnership, something that's never been done in South Dakota with our state government. This would be the first of its kind, to my knowledge, for a real estate development. And under that public-private partnership, that's part of that RFP, SDSU would lease the land to a private partner who would build, own, and operate the apartments and whatever retail would be associated with those apartments. The project, as it's envisioned, includes a 300-bed, this is Phase 1 now, 300-bed upscale apartment complex with underground parking and with auxiliary services, they call it, instead of retail, that might include a coffee shop, a fitness center, a laundry facility, that kind of thing. And what's the scale of this project? It would be twice as big as Innovation Village, which you see on the lower right-hand corner of your screen there, which all of us that have driven by, you see that from the interstate. That's a massive project. Phase 1 would be double the size of that. In 2009, they estimated the cost at $16.9 million, but today it would be over $20 million. So, what are the possible impacts from this game changer? Well, the university would acknowledge that the junior, senior, and grad students are currently almost entirely being housed by private enterprise. They're being served by a variety of private enterprises, from duplexes and rental houses to apartments all across this community. Let's take a quick look at what's happening with SDSU's enrollment. And Dennis will be up here in a little bit. We've got a couple other presenters, so you don't get too bored with me tonight. And he'll zero in on this one a little bit more. But at this point, I just want you to understand that SDSU's full-time equivalent enrollment is on the decline. Here's some quick numbers for you. In 2010, they had 10,513 FTEs, and in 2012, they have 10,153 FTEs. Basically a 3% decline in the last 3 years. That's right out of the Board of Regents fact book. At the same time, online, internet, distance learning is growing. That's on the increase. And we'll get some more facts, details on that also in a bit. So, if their enrollment is declining, but they're building more housing, and they want to capture some of the junior, senior, and grad student housing that's out in the marketplace, where is it going to come from? Well, the only place it can come from are the people that are currently renting to those students. So we're going to lose tenants if they're able to capture them in this Phase 1 apartment project. And this is one that all of us should be concerned about. There is a property tax effect from what's being proposed. Remember, they're talking about a land lease where a private enterprise would own the buildings and operate and run the building. The land is state-owned. Under that scenario, there would be no taxes paid on the land. There would be taxes paid on the building initially. But just the loss of taxes on the land alone, in our estimation based on other similar projects, is $44,640 a year. And that's every year going forward. And the way the RFP is written, ultimately we absolutely will lose all of the tax money, because the RFP says that at the end of the lease, all of the buildings revert to ownership by the state. So initially we get the tax money off the buildings, nothing on the land, but in 20 years or 30 years, whatever that lease time is, when that lease is over, all of that tax money will go away. And what if they build out the entire Northwest Quad as they envision, with all the townhomes and hotels and conference centers and everything else? What would that tax impact be? We haven't done the calculations, but if Phase 1 is $447,000, it's pretty easy to recognize that if they built that whole thing out, it would be millions of lost tax revenue every year. And who needs that money? Well, our K through 12 schools need it, and our city and county government needs that money. And if it doesn't come in, what happens? Well, there's two choices, right? We either get less service or the rest of us pay more taxes. That's about as simple as it gets. And this was a question I just asked myself. This is state-owned land that's tax-exempt. Isn't that a form of a government subsidy? And yet what they're proposing to subsidize are upscale housing units. In other words, they want to subsidize the wealthiest students, not the ones that are struggling to get an education. If it were me, those were the ones that I would say, okay, I can understand our state government wanting to help out the kids that are struggling to get that education. They're wanting to do upscale apartments. And I have my ideas on why, but you can make your own assumptions there. And since these new apartments are going to be owned by the private sector, will they only be for students? Or would they be allowed to rent to faculty and alumni, maybe even just the general public? What about alcohol? Would that be allowed? And then what if they can't fill them, like what happened at Coyote Village down at USD? I'll give you a little sample of that if you haven't been down to the University of South Dakota. This was built 2 or 3 years ago, about $26 million. It's a luxury dorm. It has some auxiliary services in it as well. Originally, the University of South Dakota tried to do it as a private-public partnership, but it didn't work out, so it ended up being 100% public funds. They used some of the America Builds money that was being passed out a couple years ago, and this was built 100% with public funds. There's your builders and your developer right there of this project. You see anybody from South Dakota up there? It's all Georgia. That's where they came from. It's funded by you and I. We're all on the line for this facility if it doesn't make it. And the way it happened, it didn't make it to start out with. When they opened it up, it only filled to 60% full. They couldn't find enough students that would pay that kind of rent because they were trying to capture the students, the junior, senior, and grad student population, just like SDSU is proposing. But when it didn't work out, here's what they did. They now allow freshmen to live there along with graduate students, and it was originally only for the upper level students. And Coyote Village is now the first wet, it allows alcohol, dorm in South Dakota. I think there's one other on it, USD's campus, but they allow alcohol in this dorm. Freshmen through grad students, and you got alcohol on campus. What could possibly go wrong? And here's what one USD senior student was quoted saying, well, it's a lot cheaper being a college student to buy a case of beer than go downtown, so they just party in the dorm, and state-owned and operated, pays no property taxes, no help for the local schools or the local government. So what would the Northwest Quadrant, how would it impact our local in Brookings construction market? I'm going to call on Randy Hansen, who's got his finger on the pulse of that, and let him talk to you about that. Randy?
Well, thank you, John. As John said, my name's Randy Hansen, and I'm the president of Mills Construction, a locally owned and operated design-build firm here in Brookings. And I want to give you a little background about my history of SDSU before I go on. When I graduated from high school, Redfield High in Brookings, South Dakota, in Redfield, South Dakota, I came to Brookings and got a mechanical engineering degree from SDSU. And since that time, I pursued a second engineering degree, and I taught for the university during that time, labs and some undergraduate courses. And now it looks like my senior in high school son is going to go to SDSU next year in the construction management program. Along with that, we have been big supporters of SDSU through the foundation and also through Jackrabbit Guarantee and other events in McCory Gardens for SDSU. So we have a long history there, and we really appreciate the university. So it really, personally, this really broke my heart to see what is being proposed with the Northwest Corridor, because I can see the devastation that it's going to have. And I guess right on the onset, I have to ask this question. Why would SDSU do that to the people, to the businesses that support them? Well, in 2008, there was a housing study done, primarily funded by Vision Brookings 2010. And Al Houghton was a big driver of this, and I was on the Workforce Development Council, and through the BEDC Chamber and Vision Brookings, we decided that we needed to do a housing study. And so that was completed, and the results of the study came out. And boy, this is a prime example of what happens when you give the local businesses and developers a chance to fill a need. Right away in 2009, 9 buildings and 181 units were built. And then in 11, 5 buildings and 30 units were built. And then with the Bell Brands announcement and some other things going on in town, in 2012, 18 buildings and 159 units were built. So if you look at the total amount in the past 4 years, that averages to about 93 units per year. Well, when you look at phase 1 of the Northwest Corridor, if there's 300 beds and you analyze the RFP, it'll equate to approximately 240 units. So if you do the math, you will see that if that phase 1 is built, that means we will have no other apartment complexes built in the next 3 years in Brookings. If you consider $20 million, 20 to 25, let's just take $20 million of construction dollars spent on that facility in the Northwest Corridor, that means the developers I've talked to say they will not be building. They are all scared of what this is going to do to the market, and they're going to just sit on their pocketbooks, and that means if somebody doesn't build that locally, all those subcontractors, all those material suppliers, all the general contractors won't get the equivalent of what would have been done in the private market. So how many contractors would lose work? Well, in the RFP and in the presentations, they say that local developers and contractors will be given a chance. But I'm here to submit to you tonight that I doubt if that's going to happen. It'll likely be a national company, and let me show you who is on the list. The top part of that list is all the invited developers and where they're from. When I looked at that list, to me, I looked at where they're coming from. 4 are from Texas, 8 are from Maryland, 2 are from Pennsylvania, 1 from Florida, and many other states. And then down at the bottom, you'll see the local Brookings developers and then a few from Sioux Falls. Well, if a national company is chosen, they more than likely will bring in their own either construction manager or general contractor, a lot of their own labor, their own subs follow them around, these national companies. A lot of the supplies will come from national vendors like your floor coverings and your window blinds and things of that sort. And so very little dollars will be spent in the Brookings area for Brookings contractors. And why do I think that it will be a national company? Well, straight from the RFP is this quote. To be eligible to respond, the successful firm or team must demonstrate that it has provided and has developed successfully and operated similar type housing and or mixed-use projects at 1 or more universities under similar market conditions. Well, John just told you that the only thing similar was Coyote Village, and that came from Georgia. And so a similar thing I just experienced with Mills was that they're now into construction manager at risk projects, and that's fine. And so we turned in an RFP back in September 1st of 11 for the dining service expansion, was construction manager at risk project. And we didn't make the short list, which means the next round to present your proposals. And so I questioned why, because I want to know how we can get better. Well, the response that I received was that we didn't have enough of that type of experience in construction management, even though we are construction managers at risk, in that particular type of project, so we weren't shortlisted. So I said, okay, well, what's your suggestion for next time? And they said, well, maybe you should team up with someone that has that kind of experience. You get your experience, and then you can start to do these projects. Okay, fair enough. The other thing they told me was, SDSU and the state of South Dakota will not allow you to cut your teeth on a project. In other words, you have to have done this before. Okay, well, so the next one came out, and it was SDSU Indoor Sports Facility. So we teamed up with a national company that has done those kind of facilities and a national flooring provider that does tracks and fields and all the flooring, okay? Well-known companies. Put in the RFP, never made the short list. Ask the question, why not now? Well, because you still took the lead role and you've never worked with that team before on a similar type project. You get this? So that's why I'm saying that it is very and highly unlikely that a local company will be chosen for this project. So, I suggest to you that the bottom companies aren't qualified. It will go to a national company. And as I looked at some of the people in the audience, there's a number of subcontractors that work for Mills Construction. And how many subcontractors could even handle the electrical on a $20 million facility, or the plumbing and HVAC, or anything like that? It's not going to happen. So, with that, I would just say thank you for the time, and John, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Randy. I'm kind of in segue mode here. So I just thought I'd give you a quick windshield tour of what's happening today in the housing and the retail and commercial market in Brookings. It's November, remember, and typically there aren't many renters moving around looking for a place to live or a place to house their business. But this is a windshield survey that you could make tomorrow. For rent signs are everywhere. They're on every kind of property you could imagine. New, old, small, big. That house is right on 6th Street, right by McDonald's. You could hardly get closer to campus and closer to services, and yet it's for rent. There are properties all over this community for rent right now, and something that would fit anybody's budget, from luxury down to very basic. What about retail and commercial space, which is part of what they're proposing? Again, as you drive around town and you really start to look, you could rent 1,000 square feet, you could rent 40,000 square feet. It's all here and it's ready. And it's all over the place. So, I told you this would be a short segue. I wanted Dennis to come up and talk to you a little bit, because sometimes when we do these projects, we don't see what's coming. And I worry about this Northwest Quadrant having that impact. Dennis has a first-hand experience to relate with you.
Thank you all for coming tonight. We really appreciate your interest in this project and in this issue. I too am someone who is a South Dakota State graduate. I have sent 3 children through South Dakota State. I plan to send some more. I am someone who taught at South Dakota State for 15 years. I was a full professor. I represented South Dakota State all over the country and the world in my field. And so I'm a very supportive of our university. And I'm supportive. Things they do, like I thought, you know, a wellness center would be a great idea. What could be wrong with building a wellness center? Well, there's not a lot wrong with it. It's a beautiful facility, a great amenity. It was supported, of course, by the city council, the city. Beautiful facility. But you know what? If you're in the gym business, it's pretty hard to compete against the wellness center. And, you know, I know some wonderful people that were in the gym business. This is down in South Main at the Galleria. They were at that location, and then out at Innovation as well. But you know, it's very difficult to compete against the Wellness Center on state land when, of course, the state is able to hire somebody to go out and capture market share and pay someone to do that. So they lost 500 members when the Wellness Center opened. No one, you know, really anticipated that. It's all good. People had good intentions, but these are some of the things that happen. And these are some of the things that will happen if the Northwest Quadrant gets built. There's an empty gym. It's been empty for 2 years. I want to talk a little bit about enrollment at South Dakota State University. John alluded to it. You can see the blue bars there. We went from 12,376 head count in 2009 to a high point in 2010, and then we've been going down. And you can see that we started 10,197 in 2009 in FTE, and in 2012 we're actually smaller than than we were in 2009. I don't know if you're aware of this. This comes right out of the Board of Regents fact book, so I don't know how we could be wrong on that, because that's what they're reporting. If you look at the SDSU Residential Life and Dining Services Master Plan, and you read that document, it's online, you can get it, you can see that they were projecting healthy enrollment increases. You can see the actuals there. Now here we're looking at actual head count on the Brookings campus. And you can see that in 2011 it was supposed to go up in 12, and it's just kind of a nice linear increase, right, with your bar graph. This is what actually happened. The increases didn't happen. In fact, the head count went down, and as John pointed out earlier, more importantly, the FTEs went down. And indeed, South Dakota State is servicing fewer FTEs in 2012 than in 2009, according to the Regents Fact Book. This is at the same time, of course, in which there's a growth of distance education. Now, some of you know that I am with Denwell Investments, and we were the people that brought the Innovation Village project here to town. But I'm also really an academic guy, and a pretty religious guy too. And so I'm the president of something called the Institute of Lutheran Theology. And I spend a lot of my time doing this, and we deliver graduate instruction all over North America. And it's online, it's fully interactive. You know, I taught for years in physical classrooms, but I can teach just as well online. I can see every student, they can see me. Each student sees each student. Fully interactive, video streaming. I can use PowerPoint, I can use whiteboard, I can use it all. It's a great way to get an education. If you're a serious student, you don't even have to leave your house. You can just study all the time. It's wonderful, and we got guys like that all over the country doing that kind of thing. And increasing numbers of students nationwide receive degrees without ever setting foot on the residential campus from which they are taking classes. If you looked at the newspaper on Friday, you'll see that the lead article was about the RFP, the SDSU press release, and then it was our own response to that, talking about this meeting. But if you went down to the bottom of that page, it's right here. Look at this. SDSU student earns degree online while stationed in Afghanistan. So he's in Afghanistan, and he received his degree online. And this is happening everywhere. So you have to be able to distinguish between the full-time equivalent and then how many of those people are actually in Brookings as flesh and blood human beings here in this community. All projections of actual enrollment at the Brookings campus must fully factor the changing reality of higher education in North America. So what's the takeaway so far? Well, FTEs fell in 2011, again in 2012. In 2012, they are less than they were in 2009. Total headcount is up only marginally over 2009. But many of those in the total headcount are not even in Brookings. They're taking classes online. But SDSU, of course, projected 3% enrollment increases through 2013 and beyond. And SDSU's plan of erecting dorms and upscale apartments is predicated upon these rosy enrollment projections that are not presently being actualized. So why would the state of South Dakota build more housing for fewer students? I mean, we just have to ask this question. There's a nice little graph, total Brookings head count, undergraduate versus graduate to the left. Blue is the FTEs in Brookings, and look at the green. Those are FTEs not in Brookings, right? They're not here. So if you look at this, according to the master plan, there should have been 11,518 Brookings enrollment here at this time, and there's 11,075. So that's a pretty significant underperformance, about 443. And where you're seeing this decline is especially in the graduate numbers. Look at this. According to their projections, there were supposed to be 1,674 students. There's 1,532 students. I mean, these are just the facts, okay? Just the facts. SDSU has seen a decrease in 20 PhD students and 107 master's students this semester. And some of you who teach know this, of course. That was in the Brookings Register. So it's a decrease in the graduate population of 127. So when you look at the future, we see that the graduate student population is not growing, but actually shrinking. And there could be a couple reasons for that. In the September 27th article, Dr. Chequin gave one possible reason. You can see that at the top of the page there to the right. At the bottom of the page, it's probably the more likely one. He was quoted to say, and then the other reason, of course, is we had fewer faculty in our university this last year because of the reduction in state support. And the number of faculty are really important for the recruiting and mentoring of graduate students. Now, I'm an academic. You don't go to a university to get a master's or a PhD because they have a nice dorm or a nice apartment. You go there because of the quality of the programming. Everybody knows this. All the faculty know this. This is why you go to graduate school, because they have a program you're interested in studying, and they have people there who are famous in their field, and they can deliver that program. Well, at the same time we have this shrinking of the enrollment, we've had an increase in student housing capacity. I'm not sure you're all aware of this, but in 2009, according to the Board of Regents fact book, we had 3,100 student housing capacity at South Dakota State. You can see that's gone up every year. 2011, it's up around 3,900. And after we build the 800 beds coming online this fall 2013, some of those will probably be reconverted, but we're still going to be somewhere around 4,500, 4,500. I don't know the exact numbers, but you know there's going to be more. It's going to be in that area. And you might think, well, I tell you what, you might think, this is what's happening all over the country. But it's not happening all over the country. This is happening in Brookings. This is not a nationwide trend that I'm seeing anyway. Here's a slide that speaks to the issue of the number of students not required to live on campus. In 2009, according to the master plan, there were 6,590 not required to live on campus. That was supposed to increase to 7,622 by 2012. But according to the RFP, right out of the RFP, page 9, it says the actual number of students not required to live on campus is 6,066. Think of that. So there's more facts and figures here, but I want to get to the big stuff. According to the SDSU Housing Master Plan, in 2010, South Dakota State was able to offer student housing to 32.1% of its students. Now, this was among the highest of its peer group. In fact, the highest was North Dakota State at 33%. Now, of course, we're way over 32.1% now because of the new bill. By comparison, the University of Minnesota provides housing for 12% of its students. Why in a town where the private sector can respond and build to student need would the state be wanting aggressively to do so? These are just the questions that I think I want to ask, and I want you to think about as well. And really, this isn't just about housing. This is about everything. This is about retail as well. Well, what if? What if the actual enrollments on campus substantially underperform projected enrollments on campus? What happens then? hey, the master plan has an answer. It's right in there. Number 1, deploy some or all of Hanson Hall's single occupancy rooms to upper division students, assigning more sophomores to the Southeast freshman and sophomore neighborhood. And I believe that's already happening, or it's scheduled to happen. And you'll find this interesting. By the way, this is introduced in the plan by saying in the extremely unlikely event that these projections aren't met, we would do this. Now look at the second one. Withdraw some or all of the release of the approximately 100 sophomores to Greek Village chapter houses, assigning more sophomores to the Southeast freshman and sophomore neighborhood. So, looking to the future, we're underperforming in enrollment expectations. The master plan was predicated on this increase in enrollment that's not being actualized. My strategy always is, when in doubt, don't build. Right? When in doubt, don't build. Now, we talk a lot about the northwest quadrant. I remember a day we talked about the northeast quadrant. Do you remember that? That was just a few years ago. We had a different president in those days. But we talked about innovation campus, that we're going to build a research, remember that? Research campus out there. And we were really captivated by this plan. I went down with Teresa McKnight. We went down to University of North Carolina and toured the research park and thought about what kind of things can we put around this research park that would be a very good thing. And, all right. So what happened? Well, we don't hear much about the northeast quadrant anymore. We did build out there, and we built a 175,000 square foot building. That was the first one, with 158 beds. So when John talks about 304 beds, that's a lot of them, and we got 60,000 square feet of underground parking. Those numbers he's talking about are what we pay in land rent, what we would pay on 300 beds. So, I mean, that seems to be very good figures. At any rate, we thought we were doing a great thing for Brookings and for the university. We invited the administration. They came to some of our meetings. We talked about what we call it. And I got to tell you, I was never so shocked in my life when after we went and did all of this stuff, when I was told, well, we're going to do it too. And I said, well, why? Well, because the market's there. Well, I don't think the market's there, guys. I don't think that it's there at all. We pay over $400,000 a year in taxes, or will pay when everything's up and running. We have amenities, if you haven't been out there. There, it's kind of nice. Here, see? There's a pool, you can swim. But you know what? We got 25 vacancies. 25 vacancies out of 190 units. Now we started, we erected a second building and we started to lease that already in February. We've got 25 vacancies, and I got the best person who could possibly rent anything out there renting. The market's not there, people. When I looked at the university figures and the pro forma back in 2009 and 10, the pro formas were so much more aggressive than ours, you know. The pro formas wanted to, get $2,200 of rent out of 1,000 square feet. We were less than half that, way less than half that. So my worry is, where will the students come from, and what will happen if SDSU cannot achieve these rents? Will the apartment complex be bought because it's not performing and gifted back to the SDSU, thus eliminating any chance for Brookings County to receive taxes for it? Brookings is growing. SDSU currently is not. Its distance education is increasing. South Dakota State has increased its housing capacity almost 50% in the last 4 years, and that's before the talk about building a phase 1 of Northwest Quadrant. Numbers of students not required to live on campus has shrunk and is now, if my figures are accurate and they come out of the books, 10% lower than in 2008. Now I have a final afterthought. You know, I read this stuff, and I know that there is empirical data that talks about retention for freshmen and sophomore students. If you can corral them, kind of keep them together, they might stay in school. There's some data that suggests that this could be true of upper division students as well, although that's much more of an iffy proposition. The graduate student data is not there at all, of what I've seen, to support this. I tell you what, if you look at all of the studies, the most important thing, and I'm going to speak from the bottom of my heart, the most important thing to keep students in school is to give them a sense of community. Community, right? And if you're living in New York City and you're going to school at NYU, well, you know, the only way you're going to have community is to be close to each other, collect a few students, and maybe that'll increase retention at the upper levels or the graduate level, because there's no community. But this is what Brookings does. We are community. Our students live with us. They go to our churches. They shop with us. They don't stay just up there in an artificial place. They're with us and they stand alongside of us. So this is a fundamental cultural change for our city. And I ask you to think deeply about this issue. I don't believe that any argument that could be made at the national level can be contextualized to Brookings about the retention issue, because we don't have the same issues here as they do in New York City or in Baltimore. So the issue of retention is one of building community, and Brookings already has it. Thank you.
Thanks, Dennis. A lot of information, a lot of valuable information, a lot to soak on. And now I'm going to try to summarize everything we've heard tonight quickly and some comments from you. First, we know that SDSU is, in fact, an extension of state government. Their purpose is to educate, and that they have historically not served the needs, the housing needs, or the retail needs of the junior, senior, and grad student population. That's been the private enterprise that's done it in Brookings. Dennis went into a lot of detail about the fact that their enrollment is actually decreasing. At the same time, distance learning is increasing. And that can only lead to the conclusion that any SDSU housing that happens to capture some of that junior, senior, and grad student market has to take it away from the private business, because that's where it is today, and they're not growing to fill it. The law of supply and demand says that if we end up with excess vacancy, as Randy said, there's no new construction, because people are going to wait till they fill up what they have. They got to, you know, the banker always gets paid. So they just, construction will stop. Phase one, the numbers show that phase one of the Northwest Quadrant would shut down 3 years of multifamily construction. And then they go to phase two. And then, I mean, it could just really be tough on us. And everybody recognizes this you cannot watch the national news without hearing them talking about how important the housing industry is. That if you don't have if you're going to have a vibrant economy, you've got to have a housing industry that's working. Well, that's not only true about our national economy, it's true about our local economy. And all of us, whether we're in the housing business or not, would get impacted by that. The value of everybody's house is going to go down if we get overbuilt and if there's a glut in the market. It's just a fact. And then we get to the tax revenue issue, and we're trying as best we can tonight to deliver facts to you so that you have some tools and some things to think about. And I just put these numbers back up there again. Under their proposal, we lose a minimum of $44,000 a year right away because there's no taxes paid on the land. And ultimately, we lose $450,000 every year. And that's just from phase one. Because, and on top of that, the taxes on all the stuff that doesn't get built, because I'm not going to build, and a bunch of other people aren't going to build if this happens until we figure out what's going on. None of those taxes, they may never materialize. So, what can you do? What can we do? And here's the good news. We've been giving you a lot of doom and gloom, and I apologize for that. But you do need to have the facts. There is still some action you can take. The South Dakota Board of Regents has not issued the final approval to build. They've given SDSU the right to test the water, to put out the RFP, but SDSU must come back to the Board of Regents to get that final approval. And because SDSU is an extension of state government, it seems to me they ought to be, they being the Board of Regents, ought to be responsive to the people. You know, we had an election last week, and all of us got to vote on some issues that our government thought were good ideas. And some of those got voted up and some got voted down. But we all had a chance to vote. That's what we need to do here, is voice your opinions. We're not going to have that opportunity to vote, so the only opportunity we have is to let the Board of Regents and our local government officials who can influence the Board of Regents, to let them know how you feel about it. We've got some handouts available. Some of you may have grabbed one on the way in. If you didn't, please get one on the way out. They have some of the basic information and also have the contact information on how you can get a hold of the Board of Regents and express your opinions, whatever they are. That's the important thing, that you express your opinions. So we have those handouts for you at the back of the room, along with some of those booklets that you can look through. And lastly, I got to come back to where I started. I really want to say thank you. We didn't know what kind of a turnout we would get tonight, and your presence here tells us that there are people that are concerned about this particular issue and about our relationship with our university, and all of us in this room, and especially all of us involved with this initiative tonight, want to maintain a positive relationship. We want to see SDSU thrive, but we also want to see our entire community thrive. And we think that happens best when it happens together, which is the history that this community has enjoyed for years. It's been a history of cooperation, and we hope that that continues. So this is the end of our part of the presentation. We are going to open it up, turn some lights on, I hope somebody knows how to do that, and allow you to speak if you wish. I should mention this is all being recorded tonight. We have a website up. That's part of the contact information. We may put some of this video on the website, depending on how it turns out. There's a roving mic. Who's got the roving mic? Daniel, have you got the mic? That's how we're going to do it. Thank you. Okay. So I'm going to try to moderate from up here. Daniel's got a mic. He can take it around to you to speak, and then we'll answer and hear your comments. Thank you.
There's one rather important, it's a minor detail, but it's not for somebody like me. And that is what I want to know. Every time the university builds a dorm, that dorm gets filled, and I don't know about the rest of you in the room, but we always are getting students that come and they want to move into one of our apartments. They want to move off campus, and they can't get permission to move off campus because the university fills their dorms first, and we get what's left over, whether the students want to live there or don't. And I don't think you emphasized that. So if they build this, I mean, all those new 800 rooms are going to be filled. And the rest of us get whoever's lucky enough, in some cases, to move off campus. So what will happen with this other, would all of that have to be filled before anybody could rent off campus?
I don't know the answer.
See, you don't know the answer.
Right.
So, okay.
I don't know if
I just think we need to be aware of that.
I'll do my best to get to everyone here, so.
Other questions or comments?
Traditionally, students go to campuses where their parents went to. Now let's look into the future. We're going online. So which website are you going to go to get your degree? You're not going to come back to Brookings or Sioux Falls or Rapid City. It's a big issue that's not being addressed. There will be no association with Brookings as much as it is in our present time in the future for our kids. It's not going to be here.
You're just talking about, Dennis, did you want to address that or talk to that a little bit?
One of the things we have to be aware of, it's a very good point, the so-called higher education bubble and the transformation in higher education. You just can't take past enrollments and just project and extrapolate, because there are fundamental transformations of how education is being delivered. And in my own belief is that this is as great a transformation in how information is delivered as in the 16th century with the creation of the printing press. So we don't know where this is all going yet.
Which would be a reason for caution, wouldn't it?
Sure. Saw a hand up over here.
Are there any representatives from SDSU here tonight or from the Board of Regents?
That's a good question. Do we have anyone here representing SDSU or the Board of Regents?
We really do intend this to be a town hall, so anyone speaking in support of SDSU is completely welcome.
Everyone was welcome, but it doesn't look like we do have anyone support from the board. Or good question. Got one up here, Dan. I'll come back.
Assuming that the project goes forward, and where does that lease money go? Does that go to SDSU, or will it go back to the Board of Regents or to the South Dakota General Fund? Do we know that?
My understanding is that the lease revenue would go to SDSU. So they would get the lease revenue, not from every student. I mean, the private partner, is collecting the rent from the students. The bulk of that rent, of course, is going to go to support that private partner, which, as Randy mentioned, is probably somebody from Maryland or, far, far away. SDSU would get the land lease component, which would be a very small part of the total rent. That's all they would capture. Until the lease expired, which is when that tax thing falls off the cliff and we lose all the tax revenue. I think I'm correct in that.
Yeah, I might actually just add, I read the RFP. There were 7 bullet points of why SDSU wanted this project to go forward. One of the bullet points was very clear. It was to maximize ground rent. It was to earn money for SDSU. The other reasons given had to do with retention and other reasons.
I was at coffee with a group that one of the Board of Regents members was there, and they didn't seem to know where it would go.
That's interesting. Other comments or questions?
I'd like to know if the content of the proposal is a matter of public record. I'd also like to know if the Board of Regents has the authority to allocate funds, and I'd like to know who the Board of Regents answers to.
Who can answer those questions? Who does the Board of Regents answer to? They used to answer to Bill Janklow, but I don't know if they answer to anybody else. And he might argue that point too.
Does the City of Brookings really have any power to work with the Board of Regents to make this get turned around, or are you just hoping that it doesn't happen?
I think, from my perspective, I think the power rests with the power of influence, the power of the people, and certainly the city, if they were to speak, if the city council were to take a firm action and say, we're really concerned about this, about what it would do to our economy, and we want, you to stop the current RFP. I believe that message could be delivered to the regents, and that they would listen to that. I mean, I was one of the people that testified. Dennis testified. David Knipe testified before the regents. And they seemed genuinely glad to hear from us. I think because they live in kind of an isolated world. For the most part, from my perspective, they typically hear almost exclusively from university people. They don't get to hear from the population at large very often. And so they seem glad to hear our comments. I think they would welcome the comment and take it seriously if our community stood up and said, this is not the right thing to do. So that's my take on it. Yes, sir?
How do you convince the city council that this is important enough to bring it up and make it happen?
That's a very good question. They got to hear from enough people. You got to show up. You got to talk to them. You got to let them know. We got a couple of them present here tonight. I think we have some county commissioners. We do have a representation here, and I'm really thankful for that. Thank you for coming and listening, and to hear some of our facts and some of the comments from the audience. So I think they'll hear you tonight, but you know, there could certainly be more emphasis to try to encourage that. Daniel, you got somebody back there?
Yeah, we have a question in the back.
My question is on the infrastructure, the sewer and water and electric. That all comes through the city's sewer and water plant. Do we get reimbursed for all that if they go through this, or how's that work with SDSU up there?
I think my understanding is that that's kind of revenue neutral. We do get paid sewage fees, water fees. I'm sure, you know, others in the audience, I see some heads nodding from people that I know should know that answer, and I believe that's correct. I think that one, George, is kind of revenue neutral. So I can't speak to the building of the infrastructure, but I believe the developer or the university would have to pay to build that infrastructure, initially at least. Certainly we clear snow, the city, that's part of that whole services issue where if the tax base isn't growing, but at the same time the population is growing, but it's all on state-owned land, you've got more police protection, more roads to clear snow off of, more of roads to repair, all that kind of thing, but you have a shrinking tax base, and that certainly is a factor, but related to infrastructure.
I think this was a tremendously impressive presentation, highly persuasive. One of my former students, Dennis Bielfeldt, was especially impressive, in my opinion. I was down at Dakota Wesleyan University this afternoon where they had the annual McGovern Conference on trying to transcend the partisanship that's going on in Washington, trying to get the two sides together, and I can only think it would be great to have this presentation with the university on the other side and hear both sides. I'm just thinking of the fact that when I went to the University of I lived in a dorm at the University of Missouri for 4 years, and I went to grad school, and for 2 years I was in a 10-story graduate student dorm where my future wife was on the 10th floor and I was on the 2nd floor. So I'm a big advocate of graduate student dorms on campuses, and I just like further comparisons between SDSU and other campuses. I know that there's a historic tradition here, but I'd just like to hear the argument for having those kinds of things and have an open forum. And I think the university should respond to that, and President Chiquin and his administrators and the Board of Regents should hear both sides.
And I think we would welcome that. We made the decision for tonight that this would be a presentation of our point of view because all of the presentations until tonight have strictly been from the other side. SDSU has made presentations in front of the City Council. They have made presentations in front of the Chamber of Commerce, the Brookings Economic Development Corporation, Rotary Club. I mean, I don't know where all they've been, but those have all been one-sided presentations. And so we thought as a starting point tonight, we need to engage the public with the other side. And certainly if there was an opportunity down the road for a side-by-side, town hall debate or whatever you might call it, we would welcome that. I mean, we believe the facts speak for themselves, and you're absolutely, it's a point very well taken, and Dennis appreciated your compliment on his studies. Way in the back.
One of the things that I think all of us want is SDSU to grow and for the Brookings community to grow with it and vice versa. One of the things that I that was concerning to me right off the bat was that we had renters that would call to Todd here and ask for, they'd say, well, we'd like to rent something, but we're on a waiting list to see if we can get out of being at SDSU, being on campus. And when they didn't call back, I think Todd called them back, and only to find out that they would say to him, we actually went down to Sioux Falls because we could attend SDSU, you know what I mean?
Yeah, the
USDSU down there, and actually live downtown. And they didn't want to, I mean, I think the kids want to have a choice. And their comment to Todd was, you know, we had school lunch for 12 years, and we're forced to buy this lunch, we're forced to live on campus, and we were forced to live in day rooms just so that they could prove that they were full. And that was upsetting to me because I think the regents were getting the wrong message. And the whole thing was driven because they said they wanted to attract graduate students and grants and all that comes with that. And I said, you know, the integrating of SDSU and Brookings has been so wonderful over the years. My daughter, shame on her, went to USD, and she said that they hardly have any alumni spirit because they were on campus all the time because she was in a sorority. And she said, Dad, you know, to come here and see all these kids come back and they want to go down to Nick's and they want to go, you know, they're integrated with the community. And I think that really the whole philosophy gets some of that lost. And I love the fact that we do have a good working relationship with our SDSU kids, and I would like to see that continue. And I think this goes in the direction that it doesn't continue that. So,
thank you. I think Dennis wanted to comment.
Yeah, the Board of Regents fact book shows that there were 130 more students, I believe, last year living on campus than dorm capacity. So they were living in sunrooms and that kind of thing. And of course there were lots of apartments available in town, and we just need to know that. The other thing I'd like to say that it's very important for you to hear is that I go way back on this thing to the very first meeting on October 13th of 2009 when I was told about this. And the senior university administration did make it very clear that the primary reason for this was because of cash flow situations at the university. So I just have to tell you that that was what I was told, and I don't lie, I'm a very honest person, and the reason for this, of course, is I was told, you know, South Dakota State University is able to make money with the food service, which, by the way, is doing some interesting things, right? Did you get that thing in the food, you know, SDSU advertising? Yeah, well, anyway, it's kind of interesting, SDSU's advertising parties in town. But anyway, they make money in food, they make money with the bookstore, and so they'd like to monetize this resource. And that's what was used, the exact words, monetize the resource. Now, if you sell it, see, then it goes back in the regental system, and we don't have the full capital fruit from that. So it's to the university's benefit, of course, to rent it.
Got some more, I don't know where the microphone, oh, there's, I should be able to find Daniel. He's tall enough that we can all see him.
My wife and I own just a couple of rental properties. Now, if you're scared, why should I be really scared?
And you make a wonderful point. That's one of the things that, and David and I talked about this at one of the earlier meetings, that there are lots and lots of people who, rather than investing in Wall Street, have chosen to buy 1 or 2 rental properties in Brookings as a part of their retirement nest egg. And you should be really nervous about this, frankly, because this is a major push to erode the people that are renting from you. And I mean, that's what I'm saying. It will affect across our economy and lots of people. We have retired professors who have invested in rental properties all over this town, and because of that cooperation and because of that understanding that this is how we do things and it works. And this is a change in that, and it makes us all nervous. Yes, sir. Oh, we got one back there first? Okay.
Yeah, what's the timing on this? When is final approval going to be?
Good question. This is what I know about the timing. The RFP got issued last week. January 15th, I believe, all the people on that list are supposed to turn in their qualifications. From that, the university will shortlist. And I believe the shortlist, well, from that they'll shortlist, and then the final proposal from the shortlisted group is, I think, due at the end of May, like May 29th. I believe that's the date. What's that? The developers, the short list of developers will provide their final proposal to SDSU, at which time SDSU will study those, and then after that, so now we're talking next summer, is when they would be able to go back at the first time to the Board of Regents and say, okay, here's who we want to build it, and here's the deal, give us the approval to do so. So that's why we say it's time to talk about this. There is still time to take some action.
And the RFP states that anyone who gets the winning approval, it would be operational fall of 2015. So that's when it would be built.
We got one here first, and then we'll over here, then next, Daniel.
Okay. Everyone else hasn't identified themselves, perhaps because we're being recorded, but I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Arlie Huggins, and I was also, like John, born in West Hall. Just moved back here after 30 years, and live now a block away from where I was born, there in Harvey Dunn and 8th Avenue. I also wanted to thank Dennis Bielfeldt. I've never met him, but I appreciate your comment about good intentions. You know, we've all heard about good intentions, and good intentions also paving the path to hell. So to answer, I don't know who asked the question, what does it mean to you? Demographics drive everything. And if there aren't enough students available, what happens is you either go unrented, or you go to 10-month leases or 9-month leases, and to get what you can. Well, what occurs then is, as you get less cash flow, what does that mean to you as a business person? Well, you do less upkeep. And so what will happen going down the road 10 years, 15 years from now, underperforming properties will become eyesores, and what will happen to the city of Brookings is they'll have a number of properties which are eyesores, which people will walk away from and not pay any property tax revenues and leave it up to the city someday to clean it up. And so we have a demographic train wreck that's been portrayed, I think, very accurately by John, but he's only gone back the last 2 years. Having been a war gamer, and my last major assignment was wargaming with China, we look at demographics in the military, and if you go back 100 years, Europe was 27% of the world's population, U.S. was 5.5%, and here 100 years later, Europe is 8% and declining on a spiral downwards with no end in sight. China, let's look at the Manchus, the last unifier of China. They're now 6% of their population in their own homeland and conquered. So demographics are essential both on the world scene but also in local matters as here. Brookings is not a demographic powerhouse. We're up on the northern edge of the plains. We grew 3,500 people. That's great. Dallas-Fort Worth grew 1.4 million, nearly twice the population of the whole state of South Dakota in the last 10 years. So it's a fight to get people here. It's a fight to get students here. And there just isn't going to be enough students that are going to come in that are going to sop up the huge increase in demand. And I would think it would in fact impact us even for the long term. And this will be a legacy for Dr. Chiquin and others that will become, long after they've gone, become known as a folly because it went through in spite of an accurate look of demographics. So what's missing at this point, John, is you keep indicating that somebody needs to contact. You've shown some organizational ability to bring everybody here. I think what you're going to need to do is develop a petition or find a way to actually get on the city council, pack the room, back it up with signatures of interest so that council members understand that they'll be voted out if they continue with if they don't take an actual stand against something that will be detrimental to the community, and that so you do more than just talk about it, but it's going to impact people negatively. And ultimately, I think even the university will suffer from it as well, because when the private sector fights back and does everything they can to rent their places, whoever develops this piece of property won't get the anticipated revenue they were expecting either. And since it'll eventually cede to the state, they'll put less and less into it, and you'll wind up with rundown properties both on South Dakota State and in the community. And so I think this is something that you all should think of very acutely. And if John or anyone attempts to organize an opposition to this, consider supporting it. Thanks.
Good comments. I think the next one's over here, Dan.
I have a big mind. Do we know when the Board of Regents will be meeting on campus?
I do not. The question was, when will the Board of Regents be meeting on the campus of SDSU? Does anyone in the room know? I assume they do it periodically, but I don't know when. You know, and on the contact sheet, or the contact information, it's on that sheet back there, and we've got 500 copies of that. So if you want to, I mean, I don't know how many people are in the room, but we could certainly afford for each of you to take a couple of those and make extra copies if you need them. On that sheet is their email address with the list of all the regents. It is the email address for the board. On that sheet is also an address if you'd rather write them a hand note about your concerns. And all of those things are valuable, and I think a flood of that kind of contact would really be beneficial. Any other burning, got a couple more, it looks like, burning questions or comments tonight.
Question I have, what kind of study has been done on the land? I know over the years it's flooded bad, and the state, South Dakota State has developed that land, and more watershed is going off and on down that creek, and what are they going to do about all this water?
I cannot answer that. They would be the only ones that could. Their plan does show some water features. They're obviously looking at doing some excavating and maybe elevating something else, but I don't know specifics on that.
I live in a rural area, but I noticed our beautiful signs that we've developed. Why didn't we capitalize Brookings on our signs? And in the South Dakota State, it says South Dakota State, but you can't hardly read the university. It's such small letters, and Larson Park, big sign, little letters, you can't even read this.
That's another issue. You can take the city council when you... I think there was one more. There we go.
All right, one more over here.
I'm kind of sensing we're winding down, but I don't want to cut anybody off.
I too feel like I've been here 100 years, and John was singing in my church choirs and things like that, so I can identify with John here. I think the take-home message is so clear. You guys have presented so well, and one thing about it, it's all based on facts. You haven't gotten emotional. You haven't had this emotional reaction. by God, something has to happen. No, you've not been doing that. I think we can be assured, or you can be assured, you're going to be heard. This thing is not going to move without your answers given to you. So this has been one heck of a good meeting.
Well, thank you very much for your comments. We appreciate that.
Just real quick, I just checked the South Dakota Board of Regents website. They actually meet at Black Hills State in December, and they're not back in Brookings until next May.
May.
Yes. But my question for you, John, if phase 1 is passed, does that automatically mean phase 2 starts, or does every single phase have to be approved?
You know, the Board of Regents likes everything to flow through them. I assume that phase 2 would also have to flow through the Board of Regents. But we also understand, all of us, that this is like dominoes. You tip one over and you know what happens. You're headed down the road and that's where you're going. And that is, again, another worry that we have. The university officials will now say that, well, that was the master plan then, but that's not what we're thinking now. But we worry that that domino tips over and then the next one pops up and over it goes and we're down that road, because that master plan came from the current administration. Excellent. Well, there's room in the room for more dialogue. I sense that people are going to talk to each other. Handouts at the back. The last thing I want to say one more time is thank you so much for coming tonight and participating. That's what it's going to take. We need active dialogue, no matter what the result is. It ought to be the voice of the people, because this is an extension of our government that's proposing this. And so your voice does count, your presence here counts, and I just want to say thank you and safe travels tonight.